Hello, my name is Jeanne Sparrow, and I have spent more than 30 years in radio and television. And in this latest adventure of mine, I am speaking, consulting, and sharing what I have learned all along the way about success and life. I believe that the source of our biggest success comes from the value that we bring to others when we are able to express our most truest, authentic selves. It's something I call fearless authenticity. I started this podcast to have deep conversations with people from all walks of life about what fearless authenticity really looks and feels like. What happens when we find and follow our passions, and how the highest expressions of who we really are actually serves others the best. We are going to talk about it all in this pod. I wanted to get real, honest, and open about the ups and downs, the failures, the triumphs, the goals, and the dreams, and every single thing in between. And I do hope it gets deep, because that's where we find the best stuff. But don't get it twisted. It will be fun, because if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. I want us to find together the ways that we move forward, push through, make our dreams come true, and engage with the world in the way that we were created to. So if you are ready to live life as big as you dare and be brave, be free, and be you, let's figure out how to do this together. Welcome to Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. Today's guest is a mentor, a friend, and a big encourager of my fearless authenticity. He is a powerhouse in broadcasting, having served as the president and guiding visionary for one of the most successful and respected brands in urban radio, Black radio, WGCI in Chicago in the 80s, 90s, and the aughts. His leadership and forward thinking brought legendary radio stars Tom Joyner and Doug Banks to prominence, gave Steve Harvey, the comedian, his start in radio. He is also a founder and owner of the second largest Black-owned radio group in the country. He may have multiple Lifetime Achievement Awards, but he has never stopped working. I am proud, happy, and honored to welcome the marvelous Marv Dyson to the Fearless Authenticity Podcast. Hey, Marv.
Hi, Jeanne. How are you?
I'm doing fabulously well. Not as good as you, not as rich as you, but I'll get there one day.
Oh God, I am living the life in Vegas. At one point I had 26 radio stations. I'm now down to 8. And I'm really trying to sell those so that I can get totally out of radio and really enjoy my authentic life more thoroughly.
Marv, look at you. You are divesting in things, huh? You decided to pass the baton on to others. Is that it?
I'll be 84 years old in a couple of days. I've done my thing. It's time for somebody else to do it. And I really believe when you get 84, you need to turn it over to younger people.
You know what, Marv? What is amazing, though, is that you have prepared enough people to be able to do that. I mean, I want to start off by thanking you for everything that you have done for me. You have been like an uncle, father figure for me in this business. You've looked out for me. You have made allowances for me that helped me to grow. Every time I came to you with something, even if I was cursing you out
or crying
or any number of things, you
right.
helped me to grow up in this business. And I am so grateful. And in life, I am so grateful for that. And also, and I don't know if I've ever expressed this to you, but like you were one of the first like super successful Black people that I ever met. Not that I didn't know successful Black people, but I mean financially, and as far as the decisions and the level at which you were doing it, and you were still so real and kept it real, and I could connect with you, and I didn't feel like you were this like person all the way off here, but that it was attainable. So thank you for, and I'm sure you were that for a lot of other people. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. That's the reason why I asked you to be on the pod.
Oh, okay. Okay, fine. But thank you for mentioning all that. It's really great, but it was easy because you're really good at what you do.
Thank you.
And it's your turn to talk.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know what? Okay. Here's the thing about you. Let me explain to the people. Marv is one of those people. Marv is one of these people that if he believes in you, He'll only say it like once or twice, but the way that you have expressed it, at least the way I've seen it with myself and other people, is you hand the baton to us and you go, okay, go do this, and you better come back with some results, because that's what you're supposed to do. And that expectation and the trust that goes in that, I think, is so crucial. What are the things that made you into the leader that you were? Were there any moments or turning points in your life, or was it something you realized over time what it took to do what it is that you loved and were best at? Because I think the leadership part and the showing people how to do it is the thing that makes you special.
Okay. I started out really, my mom and dad were both in radio. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah.
My dad had a radio program back in the 30s, and he was trying to court my mom. And he and a couple of his buddies bought advertising time on the radio, WCFL, in fact, in Chicago. And they played music, and my dad sang, and my mom used to listen. And that's kind of how he got her to marry him. And then after they got married, then she got into radio. And then between them, they were both radio icons, you would call them back then. And that was the one thing I didn't want to do, because, when your parents do something, you go, you know what, I really don't want to do that. Then my younger brother got into radio, and he worked at WLS radio in Chicago for probably 8 or 9 years. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, God, radio seems to be the thing that the Dysons need to do. Then I got married to my wife, Kim, and I was running WGCI radio. And the station was doing, when I left, they were doing close to 40 million a year. When I got there, they were doing 2.25 million, and we upped it, thanks to you and a whole lot of other really talented people, to $40 million. And my wife, Kim, told me, she said, if you can get this kind of money for other people on their radio stations, why can't you do it for yourself? And I'd never thought about that. And then I thought, well, let's see if I can do that. And I ended up hooking up with a guy named Kevin Wagner, who I hired at WGCI, and he sat in a cubicle behind my wife, and she trained him. And Kevin got into radio in Chicago, but after that, he left and went to Mobile, Alabama, got involved with a radio station there, and called me and said, I'd like you to come down and look at this. So I went down, and there was one radio station, and we looked at it, and I took pictures and all of that. And then my wife said, well, let's invest. When I got to Mobile, and we worked there, just the 2 stations we owned, an AM and an FM at the time. And we started thinking about, well, if we can do it with one, let's see if we can do it with a couple of more. So we put together a business plan. We sent it to everybody in the world that we thought would give us money, but we ended up getting investors. And I don't want to give all the names, because very honestly, it's been so long ago, I really don't remember. But I know it was a couple of NBA players and a couple of football players, and myself and Kevin. All in it was 6 of us that invested money. And it wasn't quite enough, so we put the business plan together and just put it out there, and nothing happened. And then at Goldman Sachs, a lady named Precious Williams actually saw the business plan and called Kevin and myself and said she'd like more information. And we told her what we were trying to do and trying to grow radio stations. And she was an African American. She understood the whole thing. And she ended up getting $40 million for us to buy radio stations. I know, it was crazy.
I remember when that happened.
Yeah.
I remember we talked about it, and I was like, Marv, who gave you $40 million?
I got home that night and I said, these people gave me $40 million. And with Kevin. And Kevin was born and raised in Artgill Gardens on the south side of Chicago, way south. And when I hired Kevin, he was dressing like Superfly. And I lent him some suits so he could work at WGCI and look proper. And he did that for a while. But then afterwards, we got into the radio thing on our own. And when we got the radio stations, we just started buying stations that made sense in southern markets. And we held on to them we still own 5. But at one point, we had, I think I told you, 26. Yeah. I'm really trying to get out of radio now in terms of ownership, only because I really do want to retire and do absolutely nothing. Because I've been doing this, God, since I was in my early 30s. And it's enough. It really is. And I've had a really great time. I really have. That's what made it fun. But radio is not fun now like it used to be when I was in it. And I think when you were in it too, it's just not the same anymore. And I decided, well, there's no point in doing it. So I got out of radio, but I'm trying to get out of radio. But along the way, I mean, to have hired Tom Joyner and Doug Banks and Steve Harvey and all the other people that I have hired, I mean, George Wallace, it's just crazy. I look back on my life and I think, God, I really should have kept a journal, but I didn't. And I really should have. So now I'm beginning to take notes and stuff because, like a whole lot of people, I'd like to write a book about the glory days of WGCI radio. And I'm going to talk to Elroy Smith. You know Elroy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be talking to him about maybe helping me put it together and see. And I want it to be a picture book, but also a book of what happened at GCI and how it got to be the #1 urban station in America. And the people that made it happen.
And the guiding light that it has been for our format, because I think that when it comes to Black radio, I mean, there's so many different, you like I am a history buff. Like I love looking at how the progression of things happen.
Right.
And so when you talk about the days of, the good guys, the on VON and how Herb Kent and Joe Cobb.
I hired her.
Exactly. And all these people that, and then you worked for Mr. Johnson as well. Like I was listening to your History Makers thing and I was just like, wow, you had a presence and even a decision-making process in a lot of all those different moments that were important to Black radio, because Chicago was like the mecca for radio, period, but especially for Black radio. And it was looked on as a beacon for the rest of Black radio across the country. So my question to you, in light of all of that, is there any one or several groups of moments that stand out as your proudest achievements of that time, especially when you consider what it did for our community in Chicago, what GCI of that era meant for Black people on the South and West Side specifically?
I think when I was working for John Johnson at WGRT at the time, we actually were the first people to hire Tom Joyner to come into Chicago. And he came into Chicago and did the show on WJPC, the station that Johnson owned. And then ultimately, I left Johnson and he was telling me, he said, Marv, nobody's going to treat you as well as I treat you. And he was probably right, but I left anyway because it was an opportunity to get the WGCI and VON at the time. And I ended up doing that. But I think the proudest moment was when I hired Tom Joyner to join us at WGCI Radio. And the other proudest moment, I think, very honestly, was the hiring of Elroy Smith to program that radio station.
Brother,
because would you agree with that?
Brother, that is the most brilliant move you could have ever made. And I don't even know if you could have known how good it would be, because at that point in time in radio, it was like program directors were like a revolving door. They come in, blow everybody out every 5 years. Elroy, but the thing about Elroy was you saw his brilliance not only as a programmer, but also as a marketer.
Right. And Jeanne, you weren't there when I hired him, but I had 5 program directors from around the country come into Chicago to interview for the job of program director at WGCI Radio. And they all stayed in the same hotel and everything. So they knew everybody was there. It was crazy. And I know they were talking to one another. And Elroy's time came and he came into the studio and he literally had recorded every day part on WGCI Radio and told us what was wrong with those day parts and what was wrong with the people and how he could put it together. He finished this presentation and it was about an hour long and he had video and audio and everything. When he finished, he packed his stuff up and got out and just started leaving. And myself and a couple of other people on staff, Velma Brazelton and some others, we said, Elroy, do we get to ask you some questions now? And he said, oh, I forgot. So we asked him questions. And after it was all over, we interviewed the other 4 or 5 guys. And we walked out of that conference room and we said, that's the man we're going to hire. And we hired Elroy Smith. And I had probably the best 12 years of my life in radio with that man as my second in command in terms of program.
And I was so honored to be part of that. Like, and the thing is, you never know how special it is until it's all over. And I'm just so glad. I saw some
Right.
pictures of all of us from our Christmas parties and different events. And I was like, those were the good old days, man. Those were the good old days. And
That's what everybody says. That's what everybody says.
I actually
I
had
was glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, here's the thing. I had a colleague who's around the same age as I am, who Elroy did not hire at one point. I never knew, I didn't know that he had even inquired about working at GCI, but he told me, he said, that's the one thing about my career that I wish I had experienced was Elroy at GCI. He said, but he told me I wasn't ready, and he was right. And I was like, oh, I guess I really am blessed. But when you think about how that mushroomed out, because like if Tom had not become the Fly Jock, if you had not hired Tom and Tom had not become the Fly Jock, and then eventually had the first huge syndicated show that spread education and love to our community in markets that could have never afforded a talent like him and the reach that he had, like it's insane to me what that one decision that you made and what he did with it, what it turned into. Like Marv, that legacy, yeah, you better write that book. You better. I'll help you.
Yeah, no, I better do it before I get too old because I can't remember everything. But I'll have a lot of people I'll be talking to put it together. But the Tom Joyner thing, when he was talking about really syndicating his show, he called us about it, and we had a literally a full day's meeting in Chicago with all of my department heads. And originally, everybody in the radio station said we didn't want to do it. And I left our meeting and I went back to my office and I said, if we don't do this and somebody else does, it could hurt us. If we do it and it's a failure, we can always go back and correct it. So I changed my mind and I went back and we ended up doing the syndicated thing with Tom Joyner. And it just blew up. He did it for 8 years, back and forth every day from Dallas to Chicago. But the whole thing happened by accident because I was really trying to hire him to come to GCI and just work at WGCI radio. And after I hired him and we put the contracts together and everything, he said, well, Marv, I'm going to keep doing my morning show in Dallas. And I said, what? I flew back to Dallas and I literally stayed in his house for 2 days. And we talked about it. And his wife said at that time, she said, we can do this. And he actually did it. She did his lunch every day, put him on a plane. He'd come to Chicago. Then he'd go back later that evening. And that was the beginning of history for urban radio in terms of syndication. And then we got Doug Banks, and Doug Banks wanted to syndicate, and I tried not to get him to do it. And I offered him $1 million and a new Porsche automobile at a dinner meeting. And he said no, and he ended up getting into syndication.
When that happened, literally, because I was working with Doug then. And Doug came in, he was like, you're not going to believe this shit. He was like, Marv just offered me a fucking Porsche. I was like, what?
Yes.
You didn't take it?
And it was $1 million in monopoly money. And I said, I'll make it real. And I had $1 million in monopoly money and a miniature Porsche automobile. And I set it on the table. And this can be yours if you say yes. And he didn't say yes. It's a good thing he didn't because he ended up blowing it up in syndication. So it was awesome. Yep. But I mean, then Steve Harvey used to come to the radio station when he was in town and just do his little thing on the radio. And then we lost Tom because he went to WVAZ. And I had to replace him.
Yeah.
He moved over there. So I hired Steve Harvey. The problem was I flew to Detroit to talk to Steve. And he really didn't want to do it. He said he wanted $1 million. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. But we ended up doing it.
When you think about it, three of the giants of the syndicated radio game are all three people you gave. Yeah. So that's, right. But the thing is that you almost didn't make most of those decisions, right? So then the question becomes, what do you think your biggest failure has been, or the biggest setback you've ever had, biggest challenge you've ever had? How did you overcome it? And what did is that the thing that inspired you to get through any other challenges that you've had since then?
One of the biggest failures was when Gannett bought the radio stations. It was WGCI and WVON, and I don't for the AM, and I changed the call letters to WGCI-FM. As I look back, I should never have done that. That was one of the failures. I ultimately got over it because we made the AM a viable radio station by hiring Yvonne Daniels and some other folks. But I think probably the biggest failure that I can remember that I corrected was probably, very honestly, hiring Steve Harvey. He told me once, he said, I'm probably the worst hire you ever had. And I said, you were. I said, but you also one of the most talented. And it really worked out because everybody was saying you can't have a comedian on the radio. But a long time ago, my dad told me, if you're going to go to hell in a handbasket, you make damn sure you design it. So when people were telling me all the things I couldn't do, including Robert Feeder and some others, Robert said, you can't have Tom Joyner flying back and forth, and he ended up doing it for 8 years. And then Robert Feeder and the Sun Times finally apologized and said, yeah, you were right. But those kinds of things, every time I made a decision, I think, okay, I will get advice from everybody, but ultimately I'm going to make the decision. So if this doesn't work, I can't blame anyone but myself, because I'd hate to be going to hell in a handbasket in somebody else's basket. So I just decided I'd make all my decisions based on I'm going to do my own basket, and whatever, if it fails, great, and if it succeeds, great. Well, I'm 84. I'll be 84 years old in a few days, and all of the decisions I've made, they turned out really, really great. Who would have ever thought a short black man in Chicago would run the #1 urban radio station in America for over 20 years and have as much fun as I had and meet as many wonderful people as I have met in that time span. The best part, though, is when I look back, I think there are so many people in this country that would love to do what I did. The best part of my life has been the probably 40 plus years I spent doing radio. And I know you didn't ask that question, but no, I'm just so blessed to have had this lifestyle.
But you know what, though, Marv, that's really what it's about. That is what this whole podcast is about. It's like, what makes a good life? For, we all have different definitions of what it is. And I think that a lot of times we are told what it should be instead of doing our own thing. So I think there's a lot of value in talking to somebody who's been working their whole life, and doing it well and doing it at the level that you do it. I mean, how many people can say that they even have their wits about them to be able to work until they're 84, the physical stamina to be able to work that long, even though, like, I didn't think you would ever retire. I'm actually surprised to hear those words come out of your mouth, because that's one thing that we share. Like, we have loved our work so much that I can't imagine stopping like, I'm 50, I'll be 52 in January, and I can't imagine stopping working in 15 years. Like, what? No, I got a lot of stuff I still got to do.
No, you got 30 years before you reach me. See how you feel 30 years from now. I get up in the morning, have my coffee, sit outside on my patio because it's still warm here, and I just giggle. I just laugh, and I think somebody really messed up. They let me mess around and get half-ass rich.
But you know what, though, Marv? That was part of the thing I loved about you, is that sense of humor. Is that what helps you during the discouraging times or the setbacks? I mean, you've lost a lot of people. Like, I had the pleasure and the honor of working with your brother, Lon.
Yeah.
That was one of my first jobs at GCI, was doing traffic on the AM with LaDonna Tittle and Lon Dyson. And I also did traffic for Doug on the FM, but they were instrumental in helping me. That was one of my first gigs there. But, I know that losing your brother, working with your brother was amazing, but then losing him later, and then, all the people you've seen come and go. And so is that sense of humor the thing that helps you when you've had setbacks, or what is it?
I think my mom told me a long time ago, anger is a wasted emotion because it only affects you. The people you're angry with really don't give a damn, So I just decided I'm going to get over the anger if I have it for anybody. And I don't have any anger on anybody now. But my sense of humor comes from a lot of the stuff we think is terrible. A week later or a month later or a year later, you realize it really wasn't that bad. And you're still here. And that kind of just motivates me. Plus my children now, it is amazing. When you get 84 years old, your children start telling you how stupid you are. Every time I get together with all the family, all my children, it's coming up on Christmas, I am the center of attention because they're all telling me all the dumb shit I did raising them. And I just look at them all and go, yep, you all are right. I did a terrible job. But all of them are doing really well now. I have one son in Kansas City who runs a radio station. My youngest son, Max, worked at iHeartRadio here in Dallas. In Vegas. He didn't want to do radio after he worked there. So now he works at Amazon. He's got his own team and he's about to be huge. My daughter here in Vegas, she now runs the #1 Pilates program in America. And I'm living the dream. I really, really am. I'm not angry. And I've accepted my failures, but I haven't had very many. I really, really have not. And that is a blessing because I know it. They say, well, you learn from your failures. You do. And you don't forget them, but you kind of put them in a box and say, well, that was when I was stupid, but now I'm smart. And you're really not. You're just still the same person because I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world. But whoever the smartest person in the world is, I'm probably second.
Marv, I remember you told me when I want to say it was when Danielle was first, opening working in the Pilates, and you're like, I don't even understand this and all of this, but we were talking about your children. And I remember you said, I think I finally got it close to right. I know I messed up on this, and this, but with my previous kids, but this set, I think I was finally ready to be a father and be a good father. And I remember thinking that was so amazing. And I don't know, I can't remember if I shared it with you then, but it reminded me of when I turned 25. My mother wrote me the most beautiful letter. And it was about, are you hearing? Oh yeah. Okay. And she wrote me this letter about how she realized the mistakes that she made, but she was so happy at how I turned out and couldn't wait to see what I did later. Now, I lost her 2 years later, but I think that's really the whole point, right? That as an adult, you can look back and say, I didn't do this right. I might not have done that right, but I learned from it and I'm doing better now. And that's really all we can ask.
Really, you're absolutely right. And you met my daughter, Gabrielle, and she sent me a picture of you two together. And she's beginning to get her life together too. She's got 2 little boys. Did you meet her sons?
You know what? I met her oldest son. But Gabby's been like my little sister since we were at GCI because she was like the one I adopted. She was the one I remembered the most because she was a teenager when I was at the station. So right. I've always looked at Gabby as like, I know you think she's your wayward daughter, but she's always been my favorite. Even as much as I love Danielle and Max and all the rest of your kids, your oldest son, I can't remember his name now.
Victor.
Yes, Victor and the one who used to work at the post office, the daughter who used to work at the post office, because I used to see her all the time.
Victoria, she lives here in Vegas too.
Oh,
Victoria,
really?
She lives here in Vegas.
You got everybody around you, but the thing that I loved though is that the thing that I love seeing is how your children love you when you don't know it. Like I would see Gabby out, like, cause she's been in hospitality for a long time. So there were times when I'd run into her, she was either waitressing or bartending and stuff like that. And she was like, my dad he thinks I wasted my time. She was like, but I still love him because he loves me. Like, that's what your children say about you when you're not around, when they know that somebody else loves them.
They say it to my face.
Okay, good.
They say it to my face. They do tell me they love me. And Gabby will call me 2:30, 3 in the morning on the phone just to tell me a joke. And then I end up having to tell the joke to 3 or 4 other people because they were so funny. But I know that we were supposed to talk about how I got where I am in the radio side of it and all that. I will simply tell you that, and I said it before, I am blessed.
Yes.
And I am so glad that I gave so many people an opportunity in broadcasting to do the things they do and did. And that's a good thing to me. If I die tomorrow, I hope people will say Marv Dyson gave me my shot, including Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey, when he came on the radio and wanted to do things, I thought he was totally crazy. But I was thinking about Steve the way people used to think about me. This man wants to have a radio program, and he wants the studio to look like a nightclub, and he wants to call his show Club Throwdown. And I'm going, what? Club Throwdown? And he used to come to work, and you remember, because you worked with him. He came to work every morning dressed like he was going on stage.
And turned off the lights when we got in the studio. And
yes.
And that's how we ran it. But you know what though, Marv? It was a vibe. And we were all on board with it because Steve was a good leader for us. And Steve also he wanted to learn how to do it, because for him, I mean, I'll have to ask him when I eventually get him in this room. But I think for him, it was mastering another way of performing. Because I know that's what it was for George Wallace. It was like, I'm this comedian. I know how to make people laugh, but how do I make people laugh in this format? How do I understand it? And look at what Steve has been able to do. And George too. He's worked on everybody's radio show, and started a trend for a lot of radio people to come from the comedy world and vice versa. There are a lot of radio people who end up going into the comedy world now, but because there's so much synergy in between what we do. Is there something that you felt challenged by in yourself, like something you had to learn how to love about yourself, or something that you had to figure out how to change to be the success that you are, to be the person that you've become, to feel blessed about it?
Oh, I think one thing I remember, I think about it, I'm only 5'3" tall. And I'm extremely dark, as you can see. And early on in my life, both of my brothers, Lon and my older brother, Richard, that was when black was not beautiful. And they used to literally make me cry when they would call me, you old black thing. Mm-hmm. And then black got beautiful. And I was pulling all the beautiful women and having all the fun. And that's when I realized black is beautiful, and I should never have cried and felt shame about it. The other thing was being short was an advantage, because all the tall people I ran into, and I believe in tall, warm, and wonderful, but tall people get over on tall, warm, and wonderful. I get over on being short, black, and hopefully smarter than most of the tall people I know.
We used to joke about that, because literally you came right here.
I know. We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about
awkward conversations. Like Marv. Marv, but you know what? The thing that I love about you is how honest you are about that. And you always have been. And that's really the reason why I wanted you on this podcast, because you gave me your love for yourself. However you got to it, I couldn't know until this moment. The love that you have for yourself and what you do and what you bring to other people is the gift. It absolutely is the gift. And I want other people to feel that too, because I think that is the key to all our success. And working with people like you and Elroy in my 20s helped me not to be, because a lot of times, especially in our business, especially as talent, we try to please other people,
right?
Become what other people tell us to do. And I remember the freedom of being at GCI during those times, working with you and Elroy, was giving me the permission to be Jeanne, the best Jeanne I could be. But you wanted me, the real me, to come forward. And that was a gift that has carried me through. And I think it's the reason why I still work to this day, is because there is no other Jeanne, just like there is no other Marv. And that's the reason why we're still here. So I end my podcast with one big question.
You don't end it yet. You don't end it yet. I want to tell you a story about you.
Oh,
do you remember when Howard had hit his girlfriend, and you were working late that night. I think you had a show then on GCI, and I was in my office, and I was really concerned. I didn't know what to do with Howard, and I'm going, God, what do I do? He's in the news now. He's in the newspapers every day, and people call him all kinds of names.
Howard McGee, when
yes, Howard McGee.
Right. Yep. For people who might not remember. Yep.
Right. And I went into the studio and I said, Jeanne, how do I handle this? And I don't know if you remember this. You said, Marv, reach out to the organizations in Chicago that are headed and run by women and ask them what they think you should do. It was the best advice I'd ever gotten in terms of a crisis at a radio station, Jeanne. And I talked to 4 or 5 women who were running things in Chicago, and all of them gave me really good advice. And ultimately, they ended by saying, but, we'll give you the advice and make it work. And if it really does work, and they were very honest, we'd like you to support our different endeavors. Howard got through it because you told me how to get through it. And I conveyed that to the women, and they conveyed their information to me, and everything worked out well. And this is an opportunity to thank you for doing something that you didn't think was brilliant, but it was one of the roughest times in my broadcast career. And I don't think I would have survived it had you not been on the air that day. Thank you very much.
Oh my God, Marv. I remember that conversation because I remember how I felt when I heard the news, and, and Howard and I had our conflicts at that point.
Right.
But I remember thinking something that was a reaction, and Lisa was both of our producers at the time. And I remember thinking, okay, this is a reaction that, yes, was unfortunate and hurt someone else, but right. How do we all move forward from it? Does one moment end everything? And I think it's an example of how things were different then than they are now, where people kind of, are really quick to throw the off switch on you when you make a mistake, when you make a misstep. And so I always try to lead with kindness, even if I have nothing to do with it. But I remember thinking at that time, like, I have no idea, because I think I was probably still in my early 30s then. And I remember thinking, I have no idea, but I don't want this man to lose and I don't want the station to also lose everything based on a bad response. And I was like, what would I would want somebody to ask, like, if somebody else got hurt, I'd want somebody to ask, like, how to deal with it, ask somebody who's been in that situation. And I was like, well, ask somebody who knows. And I'm glad that I was able, if I spoke from my heart, that what I spoke from my heart is something that helped you. I didn't realize how hard it was for you at that time. I really didn't.
I know it was awful, but I mean, I survived it because I had the good sense to hire you and let you do your thing. And I think at some point, Steve Harvey should thank you. Steve Harvey and Doug Banks should thank you for making them the successes that they became, because Steve raved about you, and Doug, Doug loved you to death. I don't know of anybody that can say anything bad about Jeanne Sparrow, except when she gets emotional, she cries. But I have that same problem. I still cry at movies and at my children. I have a 1-year-old grandson here in Vegas now. And when he started walking 2 weeks ago, and I am holding him and he's walking. I was crying. And then when one of my older sons, Jordan, won the high school diving competition for the whole state of Illinois at Hinsdale South High School. And I cried that day too, because only one other Black person had ever done that, and that was 50 years ago. And then he got accepted at Harvard and Princeton and said, I don't want to go to Harvard and Princeton. I said, where do you want to go? So he went to USC and sent me a text and said, Dad, send my flip-flops. This is where I'm going to school. And he went to USC and got out in 3 years, and now he's living in California and doing his own thing. And I am blessed, but I want to thank you for that one time you really saved my ass.
You're welcome.
And cried. I remember the times we cried when we'd be in my office sometimes working late.
I was just about to talk about that. And you know what, Marv, that's another thing that made you special as a leader, because I always felt like my emotions were a weakness. And it was something that I always tried to to hide, especially when I was younger.
Mhm.
But you gave me permission by us crying together. Like I remember one time going into your office I think it was the first time I'd ever walked in your office, and I was like, I was upset about something, and I was started crying, and then you were like, well, wait, why are you upset? And then you started crying, and I was like, these white people, we can work through this. And it was the best thing in the world, Marv, because I knew you cared. Because I knew you gave a shit.
Yeah.
Like, and you felt the same
Mhm.
thing I did, and you didn't even understand why you didn't even know I have been upset about something. And we worked it out in that moment, hugged it out, and I left. It was just,
Mhm.
when I hear people talking about leadership now, and I always tell people, like, be you, because you
Yeah.
don't know what other people are dealing with that they haven't told you yet. And I think about you and how you led us and our whole team and how you gave us what we needed. And we would get mad at you because you would make decisions that we didn't like. But ultimately, we understood that it was for the best of the station and for the best and ultimately for us. So I thank you for that. And
You're welcome.
my last question is and I think you've already answered this, but I always end with this question. When do you feel like you are at your best, truest, most authentic expression of yourself?
Uh, I would honestly say when I married my wife, Kim, 36 years ago, and we had Father George Clements and a white priest that had baptized her officiate our wedding at Holy Angels. And I think it was about 7 months after we got married at Holy Angels, the church burned down. But I credit Kim for giving me the freedom to do all this stupid shit that a lot of people said were stupid. And she stood by me and said, go for it. That was the one thing that really just really made my day. And we've had our moments. I mean, we have fought like cats and dogs, not hitting one another, just screaming and hollering. And but she's hung in for 36 years, and I love her more today than yesterday, and half as much as I will tomorrow.
Oh,
And that,
Mark, I love that.
I mean, the world said this would never last. Her parents said it will never last. Well, her mom lives here in Vegas now, and her mom was here visiting us yesterday. And her mom's on our 10th anniversary. Her mom sent me a card and said, "Well, you fooled the world, and you definitely fooled this whole family because we didn't give you a prayer chance in hell of ever surviving all of this. It's been 36 years, and it's really worked out well."
And
That's it.
having a
You have to
cheer.
have somebody that believes it.
Yep. I love that, Marv. That is a great note to end on. I love you dearly. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sticking through all of our technical glitches. I appreciate you so much. And I am grateful to you
Oh,
because without you, I wouldn't be where I am now.
you're entirely welcome, and I wouldn't be where I am without you either. Bye.
I love you. I love Marv Dyson. He always makes me laugh with all the lessons that he gives me. I mean, y'all, since I was in my 20s, this is how we get along and how he says things. We've cried together, laughed together, as we talked about. But my favorite lesson, and something he's never said to me before, about his dad saying, if you're gonna go to hell in a handbasket, you better make damn sure you're the one that's designing it. Oh, that one hit me so hard because I'm one of those people that I'm always looking for advice and doing research when I'm trying out something new. And I take so long to get started because of that sometimes. I mean, sometimes I just dive in without looking at the instructions. That's a thing too. But when I'm unsure, I look for the advice. And the thing is that when it comes down to actually doing it, I got to do it my way, just like you have to do it your way. And if we do it somebody else's way, sure, it might turn out okay. But if it doesn't turn out okay, then, we'll always be wondering what if, right? And I think it's better to be sure that you're doing it your way and learn from that because that's our path, right? Our individual unique path that only we can follow. So it also tickles me the picture of Marv sitting on his back deck, giggling and thinking that somebody really messed up and let him mess around and get half-ass rich. May we all be so blessed, especially in a handbasket that we have designed ourselves. Thank you, Marv Dyson. Appreciate you for the laughs and the lessons. I'm forever grateful that we've been on a path together. Thank you to my Fearless Authenticity production team for making this pod happen. And thank you to you, our listeners, for your support. Without you, it's not possible. Please follow me on social at JM Sparrow. If you like what you hear, let us know, rate, review, and follow us on the iHeart app, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and share with your community too. We really appreciate it. Also, send us your thoughts, your questions, what you're thinking about. Also share how you're being your best, truest, most authentic self. And tell us who you want to hear from. Whose personal fearless authenticity story do you want to know? We want to know it too. So can't wait to hear you and hear from you and see your comments. This has been Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon.